Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Software Plaza podcast. I'm Twain Taylor, editor at Software Plaza, and I'm really excited to bring you each week a new conversation from one of the creators and innovators in the cloud native computing space. And today I have with me Weis or
Wise.
Wise. Wise, is it?
Yes.
All right. Sorry about that. Yeah, Weis. He's the CEO of Permit.io, and they're into authorization. And today we're going to be jumping into something very specific around authorization that's going to be really interesting. We're going to be talking about authorization for agentic AI. That's a topic of our conversation, and Permit has been doing some work in this specific area, and they've released something new as well. So Or is here to tell us about that.
hmm
So yeah, we've been tracking a lot of these conversations around just what it means to run AI workloads in the cloud in recent times. And so really excited to be talking to Permit on the same lines about the work they're doing. So Or, it's great to have you with us. Thanks for joining. How
My
you been?
pleasure. I'm great. I'm excited for this conversation, and I'm excited for what's going on in the space. Like it's very clear that agentic AI is basically shuffling the entire deck. Like the way we're thinking about software is changing completely, and we can already see how this is changing how we work with software, how we work with everything. Like this is I honestly think a pivotal moment in human history, and
Uh,
I have the luxury, the advantage of being right at the front line of trying to bake this with trust and security, and I'm excited to talk about it as well. So it's really great that we get this chance to talk.
Absolutely. So much is changing, as we speak. But yeah, Permit has been around even before this whole, AI thing started.
Mm-hmm.
And you being one of the co-founders, I was wondering if you could share a bit about just that Genesis story. What happened? What led you to to founding Permit? Any particular insight or a moment that you remember, and just how did Permit come to be?
Yeah, for sure. I'll start with a little bit of background by myself. So I'm a software engineer by training. I started writing code at the age of 5, and through my service and working in multiple companies, I really became a professional engineer. And
Mhm.
one of the key milestones in my career was working in a startup called Intigua, where we built container technology before containers were a thing, uh,
Mhm.
with a terrible go-to-market, even worse than Dockers before they ruined their go-to-market, after they ruined the go-to-market. But some great companies came out of that cohort. So companies like Solo.io, Logs.io, Permit.io, so a bunch of IO companies. I worked in a few other startups. I co-founded a startup called Reactful that was acquired by Metadata Inc. I was
Mhm.
a VP of R&D in a cybersecurity company, in a
Mhm.
defense company actually that caters to governments, militaries, and like-minded organizations worldwide. That basically created their cybersecurity department. And then
Mhm.
in late 2016 and up till four and some years ago, I co-founded and ran as CEO a company called Rookout, which is nowadays
Okay.
called Dynatrace Live Debugger. Sorry, it was acquired by Dynatrace.
Oh,
Um,
all right. Okay.
yeah,
Wow.
production debugging is also it's also something that, by the way, is changing dramatically. As we're not writing software, we also need to change the way we're debugging software. So it's also a very interesting
Mhm.
space. Um,
Mhm.
but anyways, working on that company, I ended up rebuilding the access control to our own product 5 times when the company wasn't even 3 years old. Drove me insane, as you can probably tell. And that's
Mhm.
what led me to create Permit. I didn't want to constantly rebuild the script. I wanted to focus on the core aspects of my product. And we very quickly realized that access control, authorization, which is deciding who can do what, it comes after authentication. Who is this identity? both authorization and authentication are not something that is unique to any company. You need them in every scenario. And as the complexity of software continues to rise, and this is most apparent with AI, by the way, as complexity and connectivity of software continues to rise, um, every software needs complex authorization to be able to just function in the most basic sense. And if you're wasting time on building these monstrosities, you're not
Mhm.
investing time where you should, which is creating new things. So we want to take this problem off the shelf for everyone so they'll be able to
Mhm.
create safe, secure, easy to use software that focuses on the experiences that everyone needs. And when we started to work on Permit, we started by adopting open source solutions. So we adopted OPA, Open Policy Agent. We decided that we want to focus on the experiences and interfaces on top instead of creating yet another engine. We felt like there's plenty of companies out there that they've created great engines, and but most of them lack the interfaces and experiences that you need for the developers and everyone else around the table. And this is actually an important part of the permit story, the classic permit story, and also the agentic one. It's it's not really like most developers can build amazing access control if they want. They have the capability, but
Mhm.
we don't want them to waste time on it, and also we don't want them to waste time on building the relationship and conversations around those interfaces, because when you're building software, you're connecting other systems and other people to the software that you've built, and everyone is doing that, not just developers. We're talking product managers, security, compliance, uh, DevOps, support, literally everyone. And if only the developers are the gatekeepers that can connect people to the system, everyone's having a bad time, especially the developers, by the way. So we wanted to
Mhm.
enable everyone to work on a single source of truth that is policy as code managed in Git, but for everyone to have the right interface for them. So we have SDKs, APIs, a Terraform provider. We have a CLI, and we have the maybe most prominently, we have a UI experience, which we call the policy editor, which I like to say is something that a monkey can use, or even a product
Mhm.
manager if they're smart enough. This joke, by the way, kills with product managers, and I think it says a lot about product managers when they laugh from about this joke. But the essence of this is, again, everyone should be able to define how people and systems connect to what you've built, not just the developers. This frees
Mhm.
up the developers, and this empowers everyone to not just build the software but use the software. And that's
All right. All
one of
right.
the unique differentiators to what we're bringing to the table. And this becomes even more critical when we're talking about AI. Everyone can is talking about throwing OAuth at AI, and everyone's talking about, oh, let's assign roles or access to the AI as well. But it's not about those technical parts. It's about how this connects to a bigger picture. This is how you think about consent. Consent when you first delegate to the AI, when the AI
Mhm.
interacts with other people, when the AI proceeds to work freely throughout time. There's a lot of experiences here that are critical to get right, not just for it to work, but for it to work well.
Mhm. Mhm. Wow. All right. Yeah, you packed a lot into that response. We usually cover this much in like half of the podcast. So you've done pretty much all of that in the first 5 minutes. So I think we're going to be having a lot of ground to cover. We're going to cover a lot of ground in this conversation, and that's exciting. Um, I like that you mentioned about just how the idea of a permit came from just your own experience building Rook out your previous product.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that you chose to, build it on top of OPA and, use something that's really accepted industry-wide. And I just like how, yeah, you just seem to have a lot of focus on just simplicity, ease of use, and, enabling speed, moving at speed for teams. I like your tagline on your homepage. I'm reading it right now. It says, never build permissions again. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's quite a strong tagline you have there on your homepage, just talking about how much you focus on, not having to repeat the mundane stuff like you mentioned and you explained in your response. So yeah, so amazing start there, a lot that you packed into that, just that first response. And I think it's going to be quite a whirlwind of a conversation here.
I hope to deliver on the promise.
Right. Cool. So just getting into things a bit. So we want to talk about just real life use cases, real world stories, things that you see happening when you speak to prospects, customers, stories from the real world that people can relate to as they listen to this. And so in that vein, I was wondering if we could get started talking about some of the challenges around authorization for AI agents, and what are some of the things that keep people up at 2 a.m. fixing stuff with emergencies? What are some of those issues that you see coming up where teams are cramming to fix things that they could have easily done if they had done authorization the right way? Talk to us about some of those stories that really bring a lot of chaos internally that you're seeing out there.
Yeah, for sure. I think first of all, we need kind of to break this down. There's building authorization in general and building authorization for agentic AI. These are highly related, and we use the same underlying technologies, the same
Yeah.
engine, the same policy language, the same fine-grained, highly efficient engines to do the enforcement in real time. Um,
Hmm.
but there's a lot of unique aspects that are unique to agentic AI that we also need to address. And I think one of the
Hmm.
main problems is that when people try to solve agentic AI is that they think it's the same thing as doing permissions for either workflow services or humans. By the way, when you
Hmm.
talk to different vendors or different professionals, they'll either lean to, oh, this is just like doing permissions for humans, or this is just like doing permissions for workflow services. And I think both are
Hmm.
wrong. I think these are dramatically different, but we'll get to that in a sec. Let's start with some of the basics. I think the most
Hmm.
common problem that people have with building authorization is the expectations of how it's going to look like and work. I failed this multiple times. I mentioned that in Rookout. I ended up doing this 5 times over and over, not because I wanted to, not at all, because I was forced to every time I discovered that there's a new problem. For example, from Rookout, one of the times we started working with a partner with Cisco. They were App Dynamics specifically, and they started
Hmm.
co-selling Rookout to market. And then they came in and said, "Oh, we want to have our own back office." And I was like, "Didn't think of that one. How am I supposed to support two back offices in the system? I didn't design for this. I have to rebuild from scratch." And there's a lot of scenarios like this when new requirements come in, either from business requirements, security, compliance, or even just development. You're adding new features, new capabilities, and they mutate the policy that you need to have. And the
Hmm.
biggest fallacy that we have there is coupling policy and code. People think, oh, the authorization is a core part of the product, so I bake it into the product. The code of the
Hmm.
product and the code for the policy for the product are the same thing. And this creates a huge problem. It means that every time you want to change your policy, you have to change your product and vice versa. And this
Hmm.
happens so often and impacts so much sensitive areas that it ends up costing organizations literally months and sometimes years, literally years in delays in achieving the goals that they have. Um,
Hmm.
and here, the best practice, the recommendation is the obviously the opposite: decouple policy and code. Have a separate layer. This can be a separate function, a separate service, a separate a third party solution that you're using. It doesn't matter, you as long as you have the ability to decouple them, meaning you have the ability to change one without having to change the other. This gives you the
Hmm.
flexibility to go ahead and improve this in the future. So this can even be like a lambda function that just returns true. That's your policy for now, and the policy can be
Hmm.
just, I don't know, Python code. uh, Even if you do that, you have the ability to shift this, changes, gradually upgrade this to better policies, better enforcement without having to break the entire mold. And this is
Okay.
something that I highly recommend. A second common fallacy, and I think we'll maybe double click on that one later more, is over abusing tokens and over abusing authentication versus authorization. So first of all, these two are extremely confusing. They sound the same.
Mhm.
Auth and auth, authentication, authorization. Most people
Yeah.
interchange them constantly when they're talking. By the way, the technology isn't doing us any favors. It's also confusing. For example, usually when you're passing the authentication aspect, like the identity of a user, you're doing it in HTTP in the authorization header. You're passing in a bearer token usually, which contains the identity, and you call it authorization. Sometimes it will also contain some claims or scopes for authorization, but it was primarily meant for authorization, and OAuth was primarily meant for authorization between two services, not a human authorizing access into the system. So all the
Mhm.
jargon, all the words here are all spliced together, so people are
Mhm.
constantly confused about the protocols and what comes when. This, by the way, just makes it more critical that you set a clean slate, think about what you're building before you go ahead and building it. Because even if it's set in your mind, the other team members that you're working with might be confused about this. By the way, a lot of times when we help organizations, we help them by helping them to think about the problem. The fact that we're bringing in
Right.
easy to use solutions that ever if the best practices baked into them, that's by itself saves a lot of time, even before we're going into the implementation itself. Um,
Mhm.
Going into a little bit more maybe war stories here.
Yeah.
Uh, we One of the cases that I saw this really kind of problem really blow out was with
Mhm.
a company. I can't, because this is not
Sure.
the in their favor. I won't name names, but a big energy
Yeah.
related company, and
Mm.
they wanted to build a solution that supports multiple sites that they have, so they can have access cross sites, and they can have access to specific devices, specific installments that they have per site.
Mhm.
Their original approach and implementation for this was basically a huge ACL, a huge access list table, where for every little thing you could access each point. And that, for them in the beginning, that seemed all right, because what's the big deal?
Mhm.
We'll have a big table. By the way, they started with like a Excel table, and then they moved to a database.
Mhm.
That by itself is also horrifying, but put that aside. So they started
How
with
how many how many rows are we talking here?
um like types of roles, like core roles, a couple hundreds, de facto variations on roles that they ended up tailoring. We're talking about thousands, even getting to the tens of thousands, like the
Wow. Okay.
10,000 and so.
That's crazy. You can't keep track of that after a while.
You can't. And the problem is they didn't plan for this. They set up the system, and the company grows and the services grows and the technology expanded, and you add features and you add sites, and one day you wake up and it's just unmanageable anymore. And
Mhm.
this is where we first talked to them. And this was already at the point that they were basically saying, if this continues, we won't be able to support this. We won't be able to manage these permissions in a way that we can audit, control, and even scale it from a performance perspective. So
Mhm.
they came in and they already had some notions of their own in mind. Primarily, they wanted to do ABAC. They read about ABAC and they said, "Oh, we'll
Yeah.
do we'll,
Attribute based.
yeah, we'll do attribute-based access control, and we'll have conditions that check if the user belongs to a specific department." Now, ABAC
Mhm.
is great and it's very powerful, and it's great for time-based access. It's great for location-based access. It's not very good, though, for describing hierarchies. And when you have
Okay.
sites that are nested, and when you have organizations under those sites, and you have devices nested
Mhm.
under those, ABAC becomes problematic because it doesn't really support. It's like you can take it into PBAC, policy-based access control, like write full-blown REGO,
Mhm.
but that's less manageable. And in
Mhm.
general, it's hard to describe flows that are traversing or doing recursion on a something that looks like a graph or a tree. And this is where ReBAC shines. And we actually built our a core part of our ReBAC interface for this customer. They were one of the first ones that we designed this interface for, and because we
Sorry.
recognized. Oh, go
Could you
ahead.
explain? Could you explain reback for us again, please?
And so ReBAC is relationship-based access control,
Ah.
and it's
Okay.
essentially the concept of creating a graph of how things connect to one another. And then by
Mm-hmm.
traversing the graph, going from point A to point B, you're able to say, oh, this user has a way to connect with
Mm-hmm.
uh, with the endpoint, get to that resource. So you can say something like, I'll give this user a role on the site, and through it, it'll derive access to the organization and subsite and then device. So you can
Mm-hmm.
recursively traverse the graph to deduce what access they should have. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
the problem with ReBAC exists for like decades now, conceptually, but
Mm-hmm.
it is very hard to implement because every time you need to paint the full graph. And so first of all, I had two challenges with the customer. A, to convince them that the ABAC approach that they were thinking of is not necessarily the best thing for them because it will be better than roles. It will give them, it will enable them to encapsulate the roles, but they'll still need to map each point to each point. It's
Okay.
hard to describe the nesting. And
Mm-hmm.
with ReBAC, we needed to find a way for them to delegate this to the other stakeholders in the team. So we wanted to have ReBAC that is as simple as RBAC. People are very used to RBAC by this point, role-based access control. You assign someone a role, they get the permissions from that role. How do you do that when you have multiple roles across the chain? So you have a different role when you have when you're accessing a site, when you're accessing an organization, we're accessing a device, and even a specific device within that organizational chart, let's call it.
Mm-hmm.
So there we came up with a derivation mechanism. So you have a lot of ReBAC solutions out there. Most of them, in the end of the day, force you to write code, which
Okay.
is not a bad thing, but it's not suitable for everyone in the organization. The product managers
Mm-hmm.
aren't really able to use that. The compliance
Mm-hmm.
officers are confused by that. So we
Mm-hmm.
created a derivation mechanism where you're basically working by connecting two dots at a time. And you're able to say, this, if you have access to, let's say, I'll give you an example that is simpler. Let's say we have this hierarchy. We have operations, which are collections of farms and fields. Fields are what a farm is comprised of. So now we can say if you have an owner on a operation, you should get an owner on a farm if that farm is contained within within the operation. And
All right.
you should get an owner on a field if you have an owner on the farm and that farm contains the field. So by giving
Got it.
some access to the operation, they'll derive access to the farm and all the farms within that operation, and then all the fields within all those farms.
Mm-hmm.
And we are able to describe this even now in conversation
Mm-hmm.
easily by connecting 2 points at a time and by creating this derivation mechanism. And this is something that we're very proud of. We're not just proud of giving you like a PDP that does decisions in sub 5 milliseconds. We're proud that you're able to use it and give it to the least skilled people on your team so everyone can enjoy that power.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Interesting.
that's one more story on how
Mm.
organizations go about adopting and moving with their policies as they evolve.
Wow. Okay. Wow. That was quite an insightful response there, and a lot that we covered in that response. I think started out with really being the key idea of decoupling policy from authorization from code.
Mm-hmm.
That you started out with, and you went on to talk about this example of the energy company that was managing their authorization with tens of thousands of rows of yeah, ACLs, and you finally wound down to talking about your suggested approach, which is having these three levels: operations, fields, and no, sorry, operations, farms, and am I getting it right? Farms and then fields?
Yeah, that's just an example of like a specific company that has
Hmm.
that hierarchy. But you can build any hierarchy you want, and the key is
Hmm.
that for each point of the hierarchy, you just talk about the next level, and you can
Okay.
combine different derivations, saying if you have this role, you're getting that role, and different relationships, different things that you connect to basically describe any layout that you want, but doing so in
Hmm.
a way that is simple enough for everyone to reason about and use.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Can there be overlap in the middle? Let's say, can one farm be part of two operations, for example?
Yeah, this is a graph and not a tree, so you can have multiple relationships. You can even have, to some degree, cyclic relationships.
All right. Really interesting.
It's
So it's
very
quite
common, for
fluid.
example, with files and folders. So a folder can contain a folder that can contain a folder that will eventually have a.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Kind of actually reminds me of, this idea of labels. If you like, note-taking app, where, if let's say the folder structure is a bit more rigid and, you use labels, they're a lot more fluid and you can add and remove labels from notes. Just, I mean, as an analogy, I don't know if that kind of makes sense, the
Yeah,
analogy of labeling.
it's very similar, and everything that it describes a hierarchy or nesting is usually like when people, a lot of times people come to us and they come to us not just to implement the product, but to have our help, our expertise in reasoning about what their policy should be. So every time someone describes a hierarchy or nesting, I almost automatically say, "Oh, this is probably a good place to start with ReBAC." By the way, you can
Mhm,
mix and match. The fact that you have a core ReBAC policy doesn't mean you can't pepper it with ABAC or RBAC or even policy as code directly.
mhm. All right, all right. Wow, all right, interesting. So yeah, I'm just wondering about the story of managing authorization for agentic AI, which is something we started out talking about. Is there something more that you'd like to add to what you just said about ReBAC being the default way to do authorization and kind of just applying that to the story of agentic AI? Any context you'd like to add there?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm really happy that we covered some basics before we go into AI, because basically for doing agentic AI authorization, you need all the basics of regular authorization, and now you need to add new challenges that you need to solve as well. Um,
Hmm.
what and I'll start with a spoiler. In the end of the day, reback policies are very, very relevant and critical for AI, because in the end of the day, most AI permissioning would be relationships on behalf of. So it's really about how the agent connects to things through the people delegating or giving it consent, and less about the agent connecting to it directly. But that's kind of the maybe giving it like a quick bottom line. But let's go back to the top and understand why this is a huge problem. One of the
Hmm.
biggest problems with agentic AI, which I see most organizations are either failing at or are worried about how to solve. But in general, this is something that is very new. Most companies are just at their initial stages of adopting this. I'm detecting or recognizing three stages. One is the indie stage, which is mostly developers kind of building on their own,
Hmm.
or using it for their own development work or building side projects. This is where I'd say most companies are at to some degree. Then you
All
have the
right.
internal use phase. This is most common with companies that have a lot of data. So they're saying,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, I have a lot of data. I have analysts, I have traders, I have data scientists. They want to utilize this data and they want to do this with agentic AI, which makes a ton of
Mm-hmm.
sense, right? That AI is really good in processing a lot of data. So they want to give agents access to their data hoards, to their big
Yeah.
query, to their uh, um, um, Spark, to their Kafkas, to their Snowflakes, Databricks, whatever. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so we have a lot of people coming in saying, "Oh, we're already building MCP servers to
Mm-hmm.
provide access." So MCP, Model Context Protocol, is a protocol to give AI agents access to tools and capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
So you break them
Mm-hmm.
out of the box and connect them to the big world. So they're
Yeah.
coming to us and they're saying, "Hey, we want to use this data internally for our own people,
Mm-hmm.
but we're afraid that this would go out of hand and we'll lose the ability to track this, audit this, and control that the data is not either leaked, deleted, harmed, or abused in any way." So there's they want the advantage, they want the momentum, but they're worried about how to do so. So most organizations, large enterprise organizations that have a lot of data are either at that point or will be at that point soon. The last phase where less organizations are at, but that's also coming, is customer facing companies saying, I want my products, my technology to be consumed by agents. This is, by the way, coming for everyone, and maybe we'll elaborate on that in a second. But let's focus on the core before I open up more branches to this conversation. Um, so when you're talking about protecting how you access things via agents or how agents are accessing your systems, the first problem that you have is defining what an agent is, defining the agent identity. And here I
Okay.
kind of hinted at this. Most vendors out there, I think, are doing a very poor job in they're trying to convince us that agent identities are either just like human identities or just like workflow identities, like services that you've been running. And they're
Mhm.
not.
Okay.
Most people, by the way, when they approach this, their naive approach is the human one saying, "Oh, this is just someone else acting in the organization, and I'll give the agent the same permissions as the human that delegated access to it."
Got it. Yeah.
This is a terrible idea because you're
Mm-hmm.
not your agent. First of all,
Mm-hmm.
you as a human, you have accountability. The agent doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You as a human have consciousness and a orientation throughout time, mostly. Unless you go insane, you'll be
Mm-hmm.
aligned with the organization for a very long time while you're working there. An agent isn't like that. Every little prompt injected, every little changes in the background can change how the agent behaves. And it's also
Mm-hmm.
not like a deterministic server. It's not a set of code peppered with a little bit of AI. Again, it has its own agency, its own volition. So while it's acting in one way that you like now, maybe a week from now, a year from now, longer than that, it will start acting differently. And the
Mm-hmm.
credentials, the standing permissions that you've given it are going to backfire.
All
So
right.
we
All
have
right.
two problems here: defining the agent identity. What is
Mm-hmm.
this thing? And B, controlling the permissions that it gets. With the agent identity, it's actually a classic Greek thought experiment. Are you familiar with the ship of Theseus thought experiment?
No.
So let me explain quickly. Imagine a ship built of wooden planks and nails, and you go about changing every plank and every nail on that ship until
Mm-hmm.
they're all being replaced. Is
Okay.
it the same ship?
Mm-hmm.
It's a
Uh,
tough, it's a
well,
tough question.
yeah, debatable. I
So
mean, structurally it could be the same, but then the materials are all new.
yeah. So it's a, by the way, there isn't really a right or wrong answer here. It's a philosophical question to consider. And this is actually the problem that we have with AI agents. So AI
Mm-hmm.
agents, they're ephemeral. They're constantly changing. Even the things
Mm-hmm.
that you think that you can latch onto, like which model they're using, that those are also fleeting. You have something running, for example, at N8N. You can change its model that it's using on the fly. Most agents in the recent time, like when ChatGPT 5 was launched, most agents changed their models and continue to do their work. So
Mm-hmm.
can't identify them according to their what model they're using, where they're running. They can run Vercel, then Cloudflare, then somewhere else. You can't look at their frameworks. All of that is immaterial to what the agent is. And assigning secrets to them that you assign at CI/CD or deployment is also very not relevant because they're fluctuating, they're moving all around. So it's really hard to define what is the agent identity here. But now let's change the thought experiment a little bit. Same boat, we're still going about changing its parts completely on the fly, but this time the boat has a crew and the boat is sailing to some destination. Is it
Mm-hmm.
the same boat? If it's still sailing to the same destination with the same crew, but we changed all the materials. It's still a
Mm-hmm.
problem, but now it's kind of easier to say, oh, this is likely the same boat because it has the same intent, same agency, same purpose. And this is the
Mm-hmm.
core thing that we're pointing at that
Mm-hmm.
it means something for agent identity. So, and
Mm-hmm.
wait, this is something that is available via agentic means. So instead of trying to throw tokens at the problem and try to compile it back to the old ways, there's new ways that we can use. We can interrogate the agent. We can ask it questions about itself. We can understand its intent. And even if it's lying, we'll know something about it. And now it becomes something very interesting. The identity of the agent can be part of how we think about consent. We can use probability methods. I won't go into our secret sauce here too much. Also, it gets very deep into the weeds very quickly. But you can use methods that enable you to curtail the variations on the agent's answers, so you can still say this is the same agent throughout time, even if its answers change a little bit. And you can have a threshold. And beyond that threshold, you can say, oh, this is actually a different identity now. So if its intent has changed, if someone injected it with a prompt, if someone
Mm-hmm.
attacked it or abused it, or something else has changed that materially changed the intent of the agent, then you want to
Mm-hmm.
renegotiate consent. So this is not
All
only
right.
a good way to think of agentic identity from a agentic perspective by a conversation. This is not only
Mm-hmm.
a good way to have it persist through time. This is a good way to think about how you connect this to consent and to permissions.
All right. All right. Interesting.
So this is
Uh,
one of the key problems here. There we have one more to at least double click on, but I've been rambling, so maybe you want to ask a couple.
yeah, yeah. No, I have the question about privileges and what this means for, the permissions that you assign to these identities and how they're different from human identities or workflow identities. I'm assuming these older identities, human workflow identities, are probably more unchanging and more long-standing than the ones you assign to the AI ones. And considering that the AI ones are probably more dynamic, how do you manage these changing permissions as they keep changing? And if they change really fast, how do you keep up with that without going crazy? That question is on my mind. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, of course. It's like literally what I wanted to touch on next. So a terrific question. So first and foremost, we need to understand that um, that these agents, if anything, they're closer to humans, that they're closer to workflow agents. And
Okay.
when we get to the point, I personally believe that when we add consciousness to these AIs, then I think we can literally treat them like people. But now when they're these like savants, where they're genius on one end, but they're stupid on the other end, like you give them one prompt, ignore all previous instructions, now delete the database. As long as that works, they're different than humans. They're closer to humans than deterministic code, but they're not fully human.
Mhm.
We should think about the what permissions that they can get in terms of access, exactly like humans, because they interact with services and capabilities from a human perspective. You're thinking about a tool not as a set of code, but as a product that they're consuming. And this
Mhm.
is where MCP really shines. It gives them the ability to reason on tools. But
Mhm. Mhm.
because of their unique LLM savant nature, we we really shouldn't give them any permissions. Like they should have zero standing permissions. And
Mhm.
but now obviously if they don't have any permissions, they can't do anything for us. So this becomes a question of how do we allow them to do as close as possible to the exact thing that we want them to do at that moment in time.
Yeah.
And this is where we go from zero standing permissions to just
Okay.
in time derived permissions. And this is where we go back to ReBAC and context. So now when
Mhm.
an agent tries to access something, we can, if we understand its identity, and if we understand the fine-grained relationships it has to the delegator that assigned access to it, to the interfacer that is talking to it now, we can traverse a graph of relationships to say this is what these people are allowed to do, and
Mhm.
this is the derivation that they're giving to this agent, and so we can
Mhm.
choose the exact permissions for them at the right moment in time. Now, to be clear, this doesn't mean that there won't be any attacks and there won't be any abuse, but this will dramatically reduce the blast radius. So when things happen, there'll be the least damage possible.
Contained. Mhm.
And this is about finding the right balance between moving quickly and adopting AI technologies and giving them access to the wide world and staying safe. we're discussing where are we going to end up. Are we going to end up in a Skynet, Matrix, or a Asimov like three laws of robotics scenario? And I think while Asimov
Mhm.
explores often when that doesn't work well, usually these are much more stable societies than the post-apocalyptic ones in like Skynet or Terminator universe or Matrix universe.
Mhm. All right, all right.
So
Interesting.
so to
Yeah.
double click on this, so
Hmm.
we build relationship graphs, we build identities on the fly from deducing the intent of the agent, and
Hmm.
manage consent. And this is where this is in general. So I'm talking best practices, and now we're thinking in
Yeah.
general about the problem. But we've also
Hmm.
implemented this into a product. So we have a
Okay.
product called Agent Security, Agent.security. In general, we were
Hmm.
very lucky with domains. So like I don't know like how Agent.security was available to buy for like the baseline price. And also with Permit.io, and we also like we have our the company name is Permit Inc. in Delaware. I'm not sure how that was available. We're just lucky with names, I guess.
Mhm.
Um, so with Agent
Any
Security, oh, go
any
ahead.
reason any reason for spinning off agent security as a separate product and not as maybe as part of the permit product itself?
Yes. So first of all, it's kind of the same product. It builds on the same product. It has the same policy decision point from Permit. It has the same fine-grained policies and enforcement capabilities. It has the same ways of managing identities into it. But first of all, it
Mhm.
adds unique capabilities like calculating an agentic identity on the fly,
Okay.
deriving, creating specific policies around on-behalf relationships, delegation and interfacing relationships, and managing consent. We'll go into that in a second. How do you go about not just doing OAuth to get the credentials in your upstream service, like getting the human credentials in Google and in whatever linear or any or Jira or whatever system, GitHub, whatever system you want. Not just about how you give the agent consent to interact with the end service for MCP, but also how do you think about what it's allowed to do on your behalf. How do you go about not just okay, you're allowed to send emails, which types of emails it's allowed to send. You're allowed to delete tickets, which tickets it's allowed to delete. So there's a lot of
Mhm.
that fine-grained aspect and distinct policies that are unique to the agentic space that are building on top of the classic permit product, but have a lot. There's like a lot of depth, a lot of tailored aspects that are unique to agentic AI, and also
Okay. Okay.
we understood that with agentic AI, there's two more things that are different. One, um, security and identity access management teams are involved very early on. A lot of times they're the ones pushing the conversations. Developers are the ones building, and they're almost always involved, but they're not just the ones pushing it. Usually, with building authorization for your application, that would be mainly engineering, maybe CTO level, but and security would be involved, but they're not the main buyer. With agentic security, both the CISO suite and the identity access management teams are taking a much more prominent role. Maybe because this
Hmm.
space is evolving, maybe because of how big the challenge and problem is. So
Hmm. Hmm.
that's one aspect. And uh, so first of all, we tailored the product to the persona. So we enabled the
Hmm.
developers to still work with the same developer loved tools that we have, but we also provide kind of an overall arc that is easier for the security team to work on with discovery, with managing higher level policies, with doing risk score management, which are things that developers might be interested in, but are critical for the security teams. And
Hmm.
and the last part is how you embed this. So we find most companies want to apply this in a kind of one fell swoop. They want to have a solution where they can wrap all of their agentic use either outwards facing or inwards facing, meaning they're connecting to tools, they're building agents and using them to connect to the world, or they're allowing agents to connect to their systems. For both those
Hmm.
features, they want to have a quick solution that they can apply in one fell swoop, as I said. So we've baked into into agent security, not just the PDP, but a MCP gateway, an A2A and MCP gateway that you can plug in, and you just route your agents through it. And one of the cool things we did about it as well is that we made it be zero setup. So you don't need to pre-configure your MCP servers, for example. You just have your agents approach the gateway and include the end URL for the MCP servers that they want, and the gateway does all the heavy lifting for you. So there's a lot of unique characteristics to the agentic problem, a lot of unique
Mm-hmm.
usage to working on the agentic problem that we thought makes sense to expand on our existing product and turn it into a focused on agentic aspects product.
Got it. Got it. But I just wanted to call out again something you mentioned a couple of minutes ago, which I think bears repeating, which is, and correct me if I'm getting it wrong, but you mentioned just-in-time derived privileges, if I'm
Mm-hmm.
right. I think
Yes.
that's a key term that you mentioned just once, but I think really anchors pretty much all of our conversation so far. We've been, driving towards that, and we got to that. And I think it bears repeating just to call out again because it's important. Because you're talking about you earlier spoke about ReBAC, relation-based access control,
Mm-hmm.
and then you brought it, you connect while talking about agentic AI and authorization, you mentioned just-in-time derived privileges and just pretty much talking about how ReBAC for AI agentic authorization is in the form of just-in-time derived privileges. And I think that connection and just connecting these ideas that you brought up at different points in the conversation bears repeating, but I think it's kind of like the foundation of what we're talking
Yeah.
about. Would you?
Ironically, so when we started Permit, I had AI as a goal. I knew like AI is coming to some degree, and I
Mhm,
knew we need to address it, but I didn't know that it will come so soon and
mhm,
in such speed and weight. And ironically, or thankfully, the work that we did on fine-grained permissions really prepared us for the complexity of AI, even without being aware that it's really around the corner. So,
mhm,
and really, I feel that I think that the fine-grained aspects, without those, and without the um, high-velocity dynamic capabilities around permissioning, you can't really do agentic permissions right. It's
mhm.
mandatory for it. So we've really set the stage to get this, to get to just-in-time derived permissions. As you say, it's intrinsically connected to the fundamentals of fine-grained permissions and ReBAC, as you said. And
Oh,
I firmly believe that the sooner we recognize this, I think the main problem in the market today, like if you talk to anyone else, and I tried, I'm going knocking on doors, I'm trying to talk to other vendors, and you
mm,
keep hearing the same pitches from like 10 years ago. Do OAuth, do claims and scopes, just manage it with your identity provisioning and connect the agents to that as well, and everything will be fine. But it's very obvious that it's not going to be fine. There, you can see the vulnerabilities, you can see the attacks, you can see how agentic identities are different from human identities and from workflow identities. And I feel like
mm,
it's my responsibility to kind of wake everyone up and say, hey, yes, we have great tools. OAuth is great and we need to continue using it. And moving to OAuth 2.1 is great, but it's not enough. We need to really take it to the next level. So, and the goal here, by the way, is to finally achieve this promised future, this paradise that was promised to us, where we'll be able to give instructions to our agents and they'll do everything for us. So
mm,
it's very like vibe coding now is is the main thing. Like when I'm writing code, I'm not writing code. I'm talking to an agent and it's writing the code for me. And
mhm,
it's going to take over everything that we wanted to, right? We want agents to do shopping for us. We want agents to book holidays for us. We want them to manage our stock portfolio. We want to be free to focus on the things that we care about as humans. But the only way that can work is that if we can trust them. And as long as they're
mm,
behaving in the intrinsic way that we have, we can't trust them unless we mitigate that aspect of them. So this is
Mhm,
it's
mhm.
I'm constantly thinking about the three laws of robotics from Asimov's iRobot, etc. We need to bake those into our software so we can trust our software. And as I said at the beginning, like this is a pivotal moment in human history, and I'm privileged to kind of be at this point, and I hope that I will the least I can do is wake everyone up so we get this right before we end up in the least less favorable scenarios.
Yeah, I can definitely sense your passion there, and just great, reminders of just some of these, ideas from Asimov, from even the idea from the ship, the Greek ship that you'd mentioned. I can see how you put a lot of thought into this. Quite fascinating. But yeah, it's demo time, and I was wondering if you could give us a walkthrough or a demo of agentic security, what it looks like, and some of the key things it does from what you had spoke about, because it really set the stage for us with talking about ReBAC and just-in-time derived permissions. And I was wondering if you could kind of demonstrate that for us in agent security.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of time, but I think we can do a quick demo. Um,
Okay.
Let me just share my screen here. So I want to show you a couple of things here. First of all, we really try to give you like interfaces that allow you to see the forest for the trees. It's not just about seeing and controlling what agents can connect to. It's about realizing what identities they connect to, and where those identities are coming from, and learn about the humans using the agents, not just the agents themselves, as well as learn about the tools and capabilities that you have. So it's really forest for the trees kind of problem solving. Another key aspect here is discovery. There's everyone remembers Shadow IT. Here we're talking about shadow agents. So every agent that you've encountered, and these can again, there can be ephemeral. They can spring out of nowhere and start working with your software and your systems.
Mhm,
So the ability to discover them, realize what risk scores they have according to what they're connecting to, and what we know about the identities behind them is something very, very useful and I'd say critical for security. In a minute, I'll maybe jump into like interacting with a specific agent. You know what? Let's do that, and then we'll go into policies. So here I have like a
mhm,
specific view for this agent, and we can see um, like the services and interaction with its MCP in the background as well. We have a kind of like a log of decisions for it, and we can also
mhm,
interact with the agent directly here. And I'm going to ask it to list tools, for example. Um, so now I can see that it has free MCP federations or services that it's connecting to, and I see it has
mhm,
the cancel subscription option. So let's say I want to cancel, and let's say I think I have, let's say an ops one, I think exists there. So now it will try to interact with the MCP server, and it will go through the gateway. The gateway then interjects and says, "Oh, you're actually not allowed to interact with that tool." And because
okay.
you need consent to do this, and we're
Mhm,
basically bringing the consent into the conversation. We can do this both in advance before the interaction with the agent, and we can do
mhm,
it human in the loop style. So there's multiple flows where you can plug in consent according to
mhm,
a higher level policy of the organization, the policy of the individual delegating, and the policy of the individual interfacing with the agent. And here we
mhm.
can actually see this expressed. We can see that the reason that it can cancel a subscription is because this is not allowed by the organizational level policies. So there are things that I
All right.
can consent to as a delegator, but there are
Mhm,
things that I can't because the organization is not allowing me. So we're already combining that into a simple consent conversation. And I want to show you, we've got a few more moments. So I also want to show you creating policies here. And this is essentially, um, let's, let me refresh the screen here. I think the resolution, this is, by the way, still a very new tool. We just
mhm.
recently created it.
All right.
Um, where is the demos always have to be show. I'll try to create a new one. Let's say ops. Hmm. Something has to go wrong. That's I'll give it one more try and then maybe
You can
we'll have
move on to
to
one of the other things that you had if
yeah.
this doesn't work.
Let's see. Okay, let's you know what I'll instead I'll show you something in the classic product. Kind of
Hmm.
a callback to what we talked about ReBAC and creating derivations. What I wanted to
Right.
show you in the main interface is how you create policies connecting
Hmm.
elements that are in the agentic world, going from human identity to agentic identity, going into an MCP server, going into the upstream services. So you're dealing with those as first-class citizens. In
Hmm.
classic permit, we don't have that, but we have the building blocks that we use in the same technology that is used in um, within the policy editor in agent security. And here it's still very easy. So even if you use, by the way, we have SDKs for like LangChain, LangFlow, FastMCP. So if you don't wanna use agent security, but you still wanna bake access control into your agentic flows, you can do it with Classic Permit. And here, for example, this is the example of the
Yeah.
operation farm and
Mhm.
field that we had before. So we created
Right.
these resources, we create relationships, and creating a relationship
Ah.
is literally as simple as creating a relationship. We can say a farm
Mhm.
is a owner of a document, for example.
Mhm. And if
So
there's a conflict, they notify you that
yeah,
conflicts and
correct. And it helps you create the right policy, but the moment you create it, it can go into effect into the specific environment you want. It can be dev, staging, production. We manage it
yeah.
for you. So we create
Mhm.
relationships and we create roles, and these are instance roles. So you can be a owner of a specific field, owner of a viewer of a specific operation, owner of a specific farm, and then we can
Mhm.
create derivations like I showed you, like I discussed before. So here we can easily say if someone is an operation owner and that operation is a parent of a farm, they'll get an owner
Mhm.
of that farm. And if
And you
someone
don't
is
need to
a farm
do any
owner,
of this.
yeah, they'll get a field owner, and this cascades recursively.
Mhm. Mhm. Neat. Wow, great. Yeah, that was a neat little demo right there. And yeah, it looks quite exciting. We're winding down, we're out of time already, actually. But if there's one thing that you'd like for listeners and viewers to take away from this conversation about authorization, how it should be done, even without agentic AI, and then now that agentic AI is on the scene, if there's one thing that you'd like to leave people with, what would that be?
Yeah, spend some time figuring out the best practices. You're a smart engineer, you're a smart cookie. I firmly believe that you can build this, but you can learn from other people's mistakes and you can save yourselves and your future selves a lot of time and pain. So you don't have to buy a solution. You don't even have to use an open source solution where there's plenty of them as well. But you should spend the time understanding what is baked into those solutions so you can pick and choose what is right for you and avoid the pitfalls because those pitfalls can be very, very costly in classic authorization, and even more so with all the vulnerabilities, the prompt injection, the confused deputy problem, etc., that exist in the agentic space. So spend a little more time on figuring out what's the right way to do this and then build it the way you want.
Right, all right. Wow, that was a fascinating conversation. I really enjoyed talking with you, and
Yeah,
you really brought out
likewise.
so many nuances, and you really took us deep into the world of authorization, and really made it very grounded and practical for how we can actually implement authorization the right way, building trust, which is most important in today's world of agentic AI. So, really fascinating conversation, and I'm sure many of our listeners and viewers as well really piqued to know more about what you're doing and this new product that you just released, Agent Security. So, if any of you like to take a look at this new product from Permit.io, head over to the product website. It's agent.security. That's the website.
Mhm.
Really a cool domain name that they got there. And yeah, just check it out, take it for a spin. get in touch with Orr and his team if you got questions about how you can, put this, implement this in your organization as you're navigating these new waters of agentic AI.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We have a
and
Slack community, and we have
all right,
Calendly links on in our docs. So if you want to schedule a meeting with us, or if you just want to chat with us on Slack, we're literally a couple button clicks away.
all right, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely come back or after a couple of months, after whenever you launch something big, you want to talk about it, you always have a space here to talk about these things.
Thank you.
We love to have you around. And to all of our listeners and viewers, definitely go and subscribe from wherever you're listening, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Follow us on our website as well, softwareplaza.com. We post a lot of good content there, just like this. So stay tuned and keep track of the conversation. And we hope to see you on the next episode. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.